Welcome to Speechless. We're glad to have you here. We're live from SPNN in St. Paul Neighborhood Network. We're just about 3 blocks from where another 260 children were ripped apart from their mother's wombs, limb for limb. And I want you to know that in Alabama, something amazing happened. That the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that life begins at conception. Therefore, abortion is illegal in Alabama because you're taking a life and it's murder, which it is. So, of course, there's going to be other follow-up court cases. I'm sure they're going to go federal on that issue, but I wanted to keep you up to date of that. Today's show, I have Ron Branstner, if I pronounce that right. Branstner on the show, an expert in refugee resettlement and many other issues, Agenda 21, which just most people don't have a clue about. But then also Bob Carrillo showed up, and that's why your name isn't on the thing, because you just popped in here 5 minutes ago.
Bob Carrillo.
Because there's some breaking news about Bobophobia. Americaphobia.
I kid you not.
And freedom of information phobia.
As David Letterman would say, if this wasn't real, could I do that? You can't make this stuff up anymore. We live in the imaginary lane these days in Minnesota, and I experienced this firsthand, up close and personal tonight at the St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church, ladies and gentlemen. You can't make this up. In St. Paul, Minnesota, hosting a program entitled Allies in Faith. And do you see my hat? It says, "My Faith Votes."
Okay.
Okay. Apparently that didn't carry any sway here.
All right.
Challenging Islamophobia is the subtitle to this. Being presented by the irascible Jailani Hussein, Minnesota CAIR director.
And CAIR is a terrorist organization.
No question. Connected to Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim American Society. These people, and they are the unindicted co-conspirator, and they have not gotten off that hook relative to the Holy Land Foundation trial back in, I think it was 2012. These people are absolutely dirty up to their eyeballs. This is unbelievable.
Well, this event here, they're trying to say, hey, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of Islam.
Yes.
And what happens with Islam.
Right.
And what we teach, because we're a peaceful group.
Well, and it's basically to schmooze with everyone, to lull them to sleep into believing the unbelievable, which is that Islam, and I heard Jailani Hussein make this argument at the History Center about 3 Saturdays ago. Islam and Christianity, we can coexist. We're one and the same. We come from the same roots. Are you kidding me?
When has it ever coexisted?
Never. 1,400 plus years of history, and it hasn't worked yet. But heaven forbid they should not try to squeeze that square peg into the round hole in Minnesota. Yeah. This is a good example of it. So a Christian church turned us away, would not allow us to go to this free...
It was a public event.
Yep. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen.
And you got a ticket.
We got 4 tickets. And they turned everybody away.
And even more people away.
More people. A family of 4 children and a guy I know, and his wife traveled all the way from Annandale to just sit in the audience and preview. That's it.
Yeah.
They weren't even part of what we were doing with our podcast. Myself and my co-producer were there, and they booted me out first, and told me I was under investigation I asked, I don't know. They said, well, that's between you and the speaker.
So the speaker
Jailani Hussein said I was
under investigation. From who?
We don't know this. See, this is the magical mystery hour here. We don't know. But what I do know is that they wasted St. Paul police resources by having a squad van there for me, waiting for me to show up.
So they saw you register.
They did. I registered.
They were waiting for you to show up.
Eventbrite.
And the police officer said you can't be there.
No, not yet. I went in with my camera equipment. We were going to film it. And I filled out the name tag, sticky thing. And as soon as I put down my name, instantly, I'm beset upon by this 6'2" guy who comes over and tells me he's security for the church. And he said, "You can't stay. Sorry, you have to leave." I said, "Why? I haven't been here long enough to offend anybody." So,
well,
this is ridiculous.
That's counter to challenging Islamophobia.
They want to know why there's Islamophobia? This is it, ladies and gentlemen. There it is.
So when we say Bobophobia, it's
They're not
a real
kidding.
thing. They're afraid of you for some reason.
Is it my smile, my personality? It can't be any of that stuff, because I was grinning this whole time, Tim, and all I did was ask the question, why?
Yeah.
And the guy who was telling me I couldn't stay, I asked him for his name. "Well, it doesn't matter." I said, "Yeah, it kind of does." And I even asked for the police officer's card. He was very kind. He was a decent guy. Gave me his card, said he'd write up a little report. And I'll be looking for that report because it's not over. What did happen, though, at the end is that another person showed up. And I won't mention who. That's private. But he's a noteworthy kind of guy. He's formidable. And they wouldn't let him in, or his wife, or his 4 children in either. Just because there was no reason. Jailani Hussein cannot make a presentation in front of adult witnesses trying to support this Islamophobia nonsense and stand up against the Q&A portion of the program. There's hardly any Q and there's no A.
They just put together a brochure attacking A.J. Kern, who's been on the show, ran for Congress.
Did you see that brochure?
Yeah.
With the black mark? That's a hit
Across
piece.
the ice, yeah.
That's what you see coming out of communist countries or the Middle East when they're marking people, and I kid you not, they're mark people for death.
Center for the American Experiments, they marked all those people.
All those people?
I haven't heard those people talk about.
The American Experiment people?
Yeah.
Kim Crockett? Oh, gubernatorial candidate Jeff Johnson?
Right.
A.J. Kern? Yeah. A candidate for Congress?
So they were speaking hate against these people.
No question.
But they're concerned about Islamophobia. But they're, constitutional phobia, Americaphobia.
Bobophobia. It's incredulous. All of this is incredulous, and it's because...
And Ronophobia.
Actually, to take off of what you just said, that article that you're talking about,
by CAIR.
Those were prominent people that were in the spotlight, like A.J. Kern.
Right.
We accidentally got a hold of Jailani's, he accidentally emailed somebody his email to his people. And in his email, he points out there were 6 different people that they were targeting. One was Bridget Gabriel, Usama Dokdok, Shahram Hadian, and the one prominent one was me. I didn't make that list because those were more people at profiles of running for office or whatever. But on his main page, he shows flags of wherever I am, the little flags of wherever we spoke. We are on his main web, but that's just a side web page for people that have prominent names in Minnesota. But his main page is myself and 4 or 5 other people.
But does he have John Guandolo on there also?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, he does?
Yes, he does.
The Understanding the Threat presentation.
Yes, he has.
You know what? Here's some irony, Ron. It's not more than, I think, maybe 2 months ago. Jailani Hussein and another one of his pals showed up at a church in Cambridge, a Hope Baptist church, sat in just like we were going to do tonight, just sit there. He wasn't thrown out. He wasn't excluded. But we are excluded. So nobody can witness what he has to say, seriously. And I said to these people, you people are Christians? Seriously? It's unbelievable. That piece you're talking about, describe that even more.
Which piece?
The Jailani Hussein...
Well, this was his personal email.
Yeah.
And in his personal email, he discussed, and we have his layout of how he stops events.
Right.
And he talks about how he...
Well, he stopped Shahram Hadian.
But he tries not to use Muslims to do it. He actually is an advocate. He takes non-Muslims to go in there, Christians, to go in there and not to heckle, But first what they want to do is when there's an event going, they have to then call the church up and try to intimidate the church of why they should not have it. And they force the church to go. If that does not work, then they bring in people into the church, and they do not heckle at the church, but it's pure intimidation. But he describes how he shuts down events. Now, he told you and I at an event in Stillwater that he never shuts down events. Well, in fact, he does, because his own website says he does. So
Yes.
I am targeted. I am one of at least 5. I know the list you're talking about. That was a new list after he had already targeted us.
Well, apparently my picture is going to be up there shortly.
Well, you will be if you're not on there already. I'm sure you've been on there for some time. You just haven't seen. You're on the closet list.
What country is this?
Well, it is exactly what they want. It's pure intimidation and subjugation. It's under Islamic law. They're doing exactly as they are taught to do. To them, this is normal. To you and I, this is abnormal.
Well, see, I can see where an American citizen would say, well, Democrats, Republicans, people with different ideology, they go and counteract each other all the time, or they'll protest events. Isn't that just what they're doing? Just exercising their freedom to protest and try to suppress the vote, or challenge people.
That would be fine and dandy, because that's freedom of speech. Everybody has freedom of speech.
Right.
That's a right that we're all given to.
Yeah.
But when I asked Bob, and I'll say to Bob, would you go to the church tomorrow and ask if you could have a presentation? You speak and myself speak. That church would never let you have that. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is Jailani Hussein belongs to what they call, yes, he works for CAIR, but he also was a speaker for, a past speaker and a speaker for IRG, Islamic Resource Group. Mm-hmm. Islamic Resource Group, and he's told me this personally. Mm-hmm. He works for the organization. They have speakers that go all around through Minnesota. They go to high schools and colleges, and they speak to representatives, and they talk exactly what you were hearing tonight. But we don't have that same privilege. If I want to go ahead and do that same thing, I'll give you an example. There's a room, and I think everybody should know this, and you and I have talked about this. We're going to be going down to the state capitol. The state capitol in room 316 has a permanent display. Now, if you of Islamic
at the Capitol.
At the Capitol.
Inside the Capitol building.
Inside the Capitol. I've heard this from state representatives.
I've seen that film.
You've seen the film. And I've talked to state representatives who have to do their job in this particular room with all these Islamic speakers. Now, is that a bad thing? No. But I called the state capitol up and I asked them about this display. They said it's a traveling display, which it is. It does travel throughout Minnesota. And I said, well, how long is it going to be there? We don't know. It could leave any day. It's usually about 3 months.
It's been there 2 years.
I called there a year and a half later. It's still there. I called again. They said, well, nothing's replaced it. So then I went on Islamic Resource Group, IRG, which Jailani belongs to. And if you look on their website, it says where it's all been, but it says State Capitol. On their website, it says that there is a permanent display. Now, why is this an issue? Because there's 2 other only permanent displays in the state capitol. One of them is Native American Indians. And I believe the other one, and I hope I'm not wrong on this, women's suffrage, something to do with women or minorities. Mm-hmm. But why does Islam have their own permanent display in the state capitol in room 316?
Especially because they represent 2% of the population in the state. That's it. And they unlike the Native Americans, they weren't here for centuries before we got here. There's no reason or rhyme or reason to it except one. It's a mosque. That's what this place is. I know. I have it. I have it.
Really? Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have it under excellent authority that Roosevelt High School has a mosque inside of it.
Which is against the 1972 laws for prayer in school. Vitale versus
right.
versus Vitale.
It's against the Minnesota Constitution.
Exactly.
You can't have a religious sectarian in school.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine what if Keith Ellison were to become the Attorney General? This becomes our new normal throughout the entire state of Minnesota. And any objection to it, any conversation about it, will be...
He's not going to do anything about it.
It'll be hate speech and hate crime, just like Betsy Hodges, the former mayor of Minneapolis, established a hate crime hotline.
The mayor's compact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what will happen all over the state of Minnesota if this election season goes badly.
They are actually setting the groundwork up. Right now, there are 6 cities in Minnesota that have signed on to the Mayor's Compact. The most recent one is Grand Forks, East Grand Forks or Grand Forks. They signed on to it. The other one is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Of those, they're the only ones in the Midwest that have the Mayor's Compact. The Mayor's Compact was written as hate speech and bias against Hindus, Sikhs, anybody of non-Christians. So if you read what the Mayor's Compact says, it never mentions Christians. It mentions minorities and Muslims. But it does.
So I can't imagine that some mayors would come together with this. There's got to be someplace else that's pushing this.
Well, it is pushing.
Where do they get it?
Well, okay, well, there's multiple levels. First, it starts out the United Nations agenda, which is called House Resolution 1618, or United Nations Resolution 1618. Hillary Clinton signed on to 1618 in 2011 in a closed-door meeting, a 3-door closed-door meeting with the president of Turkey. Once she said that this is in violation of First Right Amendment, and she still signed on to it. Once she brings it back to the United States in 2015, over 50 Democrat congressmen signed on to House Resolution 569, which is hate speech. Now, when you read 569, it only deals with Muslims only. It does not deal with minorities, Sikhs, Hindus, or whatnot. Well, one of the co-signers of that, or signers onto that, was Keith Ellison. He signed on to House Resolution 569. In 2017, of April 4th of 2017, Mark Rubio, along with Kamala Harris and 2 other prominent senators, they signed on to what they call Senate Resolution 118.
Why would Marco Rubio do that?
Exactly. It's a treasonous. We'll get into that because Marco Rubio signed on to a treasonous against the First Right Amendment. Once they signed on to 118, now remember, 569 only talked about Muslims. They had to change the wording because it followed 1618 out of the United Nations, which was the OIC wrote it out of the United Nations.
I mean, the way it sounds, 569 going to any court in the United States would be thrown out.
It would have been thrown out, but they changed the terminology, and it was written by 2 Muslim organizations, one called Emerge USA, which used to be MJ's USA. They, along with another Muslim organization, they wrote the new law, but they had to include more people or more organizations, Hindus, Sikhs, minorities, blacks, Jews, but it never mentions Christians. Now, what's interesting about this passes. Senate Resolution 118 passes the Senate. It's in violation of the free speech laws. It's in violation of the United States Code and the Constitution. But now it's sitting in Congress right now. They had to change the words to 118. Now the exact verbiage in House Resolution 257 is sitting there right now. And if that passes, we lose our First Right Amendment.
Well, Congress passes a lot of laws that are unconstitutional.
Well, the good news is we have a Supreme Court that is rational at this point, for the most part.
We have some untested justices
we
right
do
there now, but
we do, and I agree with what you guys are saying. But see, what's happening is they know that this is true. They know what you're talking about. It's not going to work. So they're working at the state and the city levels under what they call the Mayor's Compact. It is the same thing written by the Anti-Defamation League. So what they're doing is they're bypassing, because they know it will never work.
So they're going to do a grassroots.
They're going to do a grassroots initiative and working at the city levels and get everybody familiar that you cannot. And in the verbiage in the first line it says animus, meaning that it's about feelings. This is about feelings. If you have a feeling towards somebody, number 9 out of the 10, number 9 says you must have a hate hotline. That's where you're at right now. Under the city of St. Paul and Minneapolis, you've been called in to the hate hotline. Under number 9, they then go to the federal agencies, and the federal agencies are probably investigating you right now using CAIR as their who called in on you.
So what I hear you saying, connected to what just happened
at the church,
Jelani,
it's probably true. I probably understand.
Well, you definitely are.
Probably called the hate hotline.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And they're using federal agencies to go after you. You are most likely under the mayor's compact, which Betsy Hodges signed. You are under the hate hotline. Somebody called you in, most likely CAIR, because he said what? He said it's between you and Giuliani.
The speaker, that's
the
right.
Speaker, Giuliani. So he either called you in or somebody called you in, and now you are under investigation.
So when do I find out about this?
Well, they've already got you targeted at on the national level now, because CAIR is, remember, CAIR is ranked as the 82nd most powerful terrorist organization.
So our podcast, Third Rail Talk, is being,
absolutely.
That's why it was featured and mislabeled badly on the Channel 9 News, Channel 9 Fox News, television news last Wednesday night with Tom Lydon. They took an excerpt from our production and mislabeled it as not Third Rail Talk, but Third Rail Politics, and labeled us as part of a right-wing conspiracy group, or right-wing, I can't remember exactly what the verbiage was. But that's how it was presented by Tom Lydon in that piece.
But the whole idea behind it, and we can't lose focus, this is all about, just remember, this is all about the First Amendment. The freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble.
Right.
They took your freedom of assembly away, peacefully assemble. They took that away from you. They then took your freedom of speech away from you, right? Because
Yes.
you couldn't speak. They also said the freedom of the press. So if you were to go to the press and counteract that article, would you get it? Probably not.
No, there's no probably.
No, so you can see that they have targeted your First Right Amendment in almost every single one, and they're using the press and your First Right Amendment against you.
I actually spoke with the news director there, who was, it took her days to get back to me, and the only reason she did call me back is because I went up the chain of command with Fox 9 News. And then she finally got a hold of me yesterday. Her name is Min Davey. Last name used to be Kessler. I don't know whether she's connected with Pat Kessler or not. But anyway, that aside, I told her that the mischaracterization of who we are is a flagrant violation. That is journalistic malpractice to do that. And then to conflate the two issues that were being presented by Tom Lydon, who's an absolute joke, and an apologist for this group of people, to conflate the two issues of the Hawala and the money exchange programs and money exchange centers for $200-300 as it was presented on the Channel 9 News at 10 o'clock, versus the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been stolen from Minnesota taxpayers. That is clear deception on the part of Tom Lydon and Channel 9 News. And I asked her if she approved it. She said, well, we passed it by legal. I said, did you approve this? Because it's a fiction, it's a lie. And you're deceiving the public by doing that. And she said to me, well, we never said that Fox 9 never said that $100 million was stolen from Minnesota taxpayers. I said, you're right, Ms. Davey, you're right. Scott Stillman, the whistleblower from DHS did. He did that. And he's right. And he also stated that the Medicaid fraud dwarfs that of the daycare billing fraud. This, I know I'm getting far afield here, but this is amazing.
But this is the transfer of wealth coming out of the United States, going to other countries.
It's called the remittance program.
And well, no, the remittances is you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, the remittances is personal wealth. Is going from the developed countries going to the undeveloped countries. And now that is under. We're only going to get this just for a second here. That is actually under the Agenda 21 or Vision 2030 that you're seeing in all these cities that these mayors are implementing. That is actually by design by the United Nations. There are 17 different goals in the United Nations called SDGs, or Sustainability Development Goals. Under number 10 here, as you can see, under number 10 of the United Nations goals, and this is the blueprint, by the way. This is the actual blueprint. Under number 10 is the remittance program, taking from the developed countries, giving it to the undeveloped countries.
And who supports that in Minnesota? I saw a letter signed by Klobuchar, Ellison, Tom Emmer, and several other people. I was looking, I couldn't quite read it. It was a poor copy. But I'm wondering if Mr. Waltz signed on to it as well. But this is the remittances program. They were trying to persuade the Secretary of the Treasury to allow the remittance program to be initiated through banking systems. The
World Banking System.
The World
yes,
Banking
that's
System.
Right.
And they said no. So then here comes the rest of the story about how they began transferring money in suitcases and wire transfers.
But they're using fraud in order to get the money. They're lying to
That's
get
one
the
of their
money.
sources.
One
I
of
mean,
the daycare money.
Not always fraud, but they're doing it through their personal
Right,
incomes too. I mean,
right.
it's not all fraud.
No, it's
But it's through. I mean, here you got a couple different levels. You got the GDP. We send over 0.07% of the world the GDP to the United States, which equals to about $30 billion a year to developing countries. That just comes from our GDP. And then out of that is the remittance program, which is personal income. And then you're talking the fraud, which is the daycare center.
It's huge.
When we get into, and I'm telling you, when this breaks loose and you find out the amount of marriage frauds and the amount of men who are married to multiple women, he can only claim one wife, but he's got three other wives and 24 children, and they're all on welfare. When that breaks loose and that comes out, you're going to see fraud like you've never. It'll make the daycare fraud look like a child's play.
The daycare fraud is chopped liver compared to the Medicaid fraud, food stamp, SNAP program fraud,
it's just helping to start
transportation.
expose all this other.
But again, this is all by design, and you got to remember, these people are what they call they're being used. And I say that the refugee resettlement program, they're being used too, because they're brought over here for, especially illegals. They're brought over here for a short duration of time to take as much money of wealth that they can to disperse back to their homeland. Just this year alone, Mexico, highest it's ever hit, $28 billion. In the last 2 years, it's went up from 22 to 28 billion.
No kidding.
And in South America, it was at $62 billion. Worldwide, the remittance program is at $586 billion worldwide. Taken from the developed countries, given it to the developing countries. Only 15 years ago, that number was at $111 billion. Since Agenda 21 kicked up its SDGs to a high level, it has gone up astronomically. You're going to see more money leaving the United States to these developing, because we get developers buying up property in these developing countries. They're going over there buying up all this land, and they need it to be stabilized, and they need our money to do it. Because why? Because the GDP can't sustain at $30 billion isn't enough to leave the country of the United States to help these other countries. So they're taking your personal wealth to do that. And that is the remittance program. Now, the problem with the remittance program, what we see in Islam, and you brought it up, you brought that subject up, is that 2.75% of that has to, there are 8 different levels, and number 8 on that level has to go to the jihad, which is the war against the infidel.
And that's exactly the point I was making to the news director with Channel 9, and that is they cut away that excerpt of our podcast just as I was raising the picture, the photograph in full dress uniform of KIA Special Forces 26-year-old Staff Sergeant Alexander Conrad. That's the end result of this in real terms, who was killed on June 8th this year in Somalia, fighting the same terrorists who are being funded by Minnesota taxpayers. And what's really interesting to me about this is that Minnesota's the epicenter of this stuff for the entire country, in my opinion.
Right.
This is the largest fraud, social services breach fraud in the entire nation by an extreme margin.
Well, why are we the target? Because we're the most liberal state. And the leaders, Democrat leaders are willing to accept this to further their Democrat goals, whatever those are, which is not freedom.
Well, we have a $15 billion budget with DHS each year.
Right.
8 to 10% of that, and I have that on pretty good authority through some legislators I know, 8 to 10% of that is being stolen. And I said, well, why isn't this being stopped? The response was, they don't. We're talking about the head of DHS, who used to be the lawyer for Mr. Dayton, and Carolyn Ham, the hapless, hopeless Inspector General. He said, because they don't care.
Right, yeah. Well, and Lucinda Jessen, who's now on the appellate courts, former head of the DHS, dated appointee, just got appointed as a judge in 2016. So they got rid of her out of the DHS so that they could say, Well, we're trying to clean this up. We got a new person. You know how that maneuver goes.
This is not sustainable, fellas.
There's the sustainable. That's what we're using. We're using that word sustainable. You're right, it isn't sustainable. One of the reasons why you're going to see a big change in the year 2020 and just after that. One of the reasons why we are getting such an influx of immigrants and refugees into Minnesota is because we have to compete against California, Texas, and Florida. They are well, especially California, because that's become a sanctuary state. If they were to not be a sanctuary state and we were to deport people out of there, they would go from 55 electoral votes probably down to about 45, almost overnight. They have taken and stolen electoral votes from many other states. Just in 2010 alone, Wisconsin lost an electoral vote. Right. Minnesota came within 2,000 votes, I understand, to lose an electoral vote. Minnesota said, we cannot afford to lose an electoral vote in 2020.
And they're counted, whether they're legal or not.
They're counted whether they're legal, doesn't matter.
And it's not just the refugee resettlement program, influx of immigrants, but you have secondary migration stampeding toward Minnesota because of the welfare magnet from states like Arizona who've cut them off at the knees at like this. You get $800 to $1,000 and that's it. So they packed up already and they're hit. Arizona's lost half of its Muslim population to Minnesota. Just in the last 3 months.
Yeah. Now there's a difference. Now this has to do with the Electoral College. You're going to see a big switch after 2020 because once they count the census, I still believe Minnesota could still lose it, the Electoral College, because California is not going to lose it. So if we lose one, what's going to happen is Minnesota's going to say, okay, we did our best. We tried to ramrod as many people we can into this state and try to keep our votes up there. Now they're only getting, if they lose one electoral vote, that means less money that they're going to get from Washington. But they cannot sustain the people that are here. They're going to figure out a way, and they're going to change the laws, and they're going to make it so they force them out of here because they can't disperse the amount of pie that they get from Washington.
From an economic standpoint, what is this, a race?
They'll do it to every state. They'll do it to every state. Every state that they loaded up on the illegals, they're useful people after that because once they get them, they change the laws, they kick them out, and now they have more money to their actual residents.
But what, I was just about to ask, from an economic standpoint, and the health of Minnesota as an example, what is this, a race to the bottom? The $65 billion of personal wealth has left Minnesota in the last 3.5 years. That's it. They were snowbirds. They've flown the coop. Businesses are leaving. Electrolux is going into South Carolina. Other businesses are closing down.
And my warning to Minnesotans is if this election goes bad, I mean, if we don't get the conservatives in this election,
it's done.
And Keith Ellison gets in and Tim Walz, Minnesota is over. I would flee Minnesota.
It's going to be over on a lot of different levels. First of all, they're going to go to sanctuary cities. They're going to try to keep them because they're going to have to try to build that number again. If they lose an electoral vote, Minnesota has to figure out a way to get rid of some of these people because the pie is just not there. Either that, we're going to turn into another California, and we're just going to turn into a sanctuary state.
I think that's the option.
It will happen. They will do that.
Yeah, and there's where you got people living on the reservations right there. Because once they build a wall around, right now we got a wall built around St. Paul, Minneapolis. They talk these liberals in St. Paul, Minneapolis say we don't want walls. Trump's building a wall. Really? You just built a wall around Minneapolis, St. Paul. You just made this a sanctuary city. You made this an invisible wall, and you just now are keeping those people under for your own personal gain, because now you got your own personal slaves, and they don't want. We go back in the history of the Democratic Party. They created slavery. They created the KKK. They created the part, the segregation, and they continue to do it to this day.
Right.
And if you look at if you look at the Electoral College. And I do a whole presentation on this. It is exactly as a three-fifths compromise, which was outlawed in 1865, because the compromise was they counted 3 blacks or 3 blacks for every 5.
Right.
Well, what they're doing in the Electoral College, they're counting basically 3 illegals for every 5, because remember, illegals are still counted in the census.
Right.
So the three-fifths census, the three-fifths compromise, still exists today.
Wow.
They counted slaves then, right? But they didn't count them as full slaves. They count illegals into the census, but they don't count them as full.
Right.
Because they count them, because when that census is over, they're going to get rid of them. Because the pie is too much. Because they can't vote.
I am personally petrified for my children and grandchildren. Absolutely. Right. I've led a blessed life. I appreciated so much for the past 47 years living in Minnesota as a transplant. This is not sustainable. This is not going to work. And it's becoming increasingly more dangerous in pockets all over Minnesota. The place is being colonized. And then you have people at the Capitol providing the funding.
Which Obama was totally against colonization,
yeah.
but yet he was doing it.
But they're
He was
providing
against nation building. He's also their nation building just in Minnesota, just in Dearborn, Michigan, their nation building.
That's right.
They're doing exact. But here's the problem. I don't look at the immigrants the way a lot of people, the illegals and the refugees, because it is our politicians that are allowing this. We have, down in St. Cloud when they wanted to pass a bill for $18 million to help the
block grant.
Block grant for Somalians. When you start giving separate but equal, they're separate but equal. What do you mean they're separate but equal? We're all equal.
Right.
Yeah, but they're separate. They need a handout. Really? Why are they separate from us but yet equal?
And they gave the same group of people 2 years earlier, $2 million with no strings attached to it, gave it to the elders. And they were supposed to use this money to somehow persuade their youth not to become terrorists. That was the excuse then. That's where Tom Lydon and I with Channel 9 butted heads about that. It's just a drop in the bucket, and you don't know that neighborhood like I do. This is a bunch of hooey. I can't believe the stuff that's being shoved down the Minnesota throat. The gag reflex is being tested constantly with one kind of riot or another, like at Valley Fair. My grandkids were caught up in that. I mean, there's a residual effect connected to all of this stuff. My grandchildren were caught up in that evacuation of 15,000 people, 6 police departments, a police helicopter, state troopers. And the WCCO comes up with this harebrained notion that it was a minor incident. Not according to the police captain I talked to. The Mall of America, the U.S. Bank Stadium scandal, the Screamtown scandal, one thing after another. And compound that with the, Dr. John Palmer's report about the cost of the health impact on Minnesotans. We have an 80% share of the measles outbreak in the entire country here. We have active tuberculosis that's just off the charts, being completely hidden. So my question of you guys and everybody watching and listening, how many hospital beds and body bags have to be filled before Minnesotans wise up just on that score alone?
But the thing is the people that are here, the immigrants and the refugees and the illegals that are here, they are being used. So we can't sit there and target them. Our issue. I understand exactly, and you made a great point, because we need to say, hey, Mr. Emmer, you need to start waking up. You, Mr. WCC, you need to start telling the truth so we can all fix this as a state.
Right. How do you get them to do that?
They won't, because it's political correctness. This is where we come down to the mayor's compact again.
Well, right. Because that's coming from down to the UN, but it's also being ran through from what you've
League of Cities.
League of Minnesota
Cities. I mean, they're involved with
they're the insurance company for all the cities, not all of them, but most of the cities in the state of Minnesota. Therefore, in order to get covered, they tell the cities what to do.
Exactly. If you go back to 2003, League of Minnesota Cities actually started the Inclusive Cities resolution, that's what they call the Welcoming Cities resolution, which St. Cloud signed, Wilmer signed, and it's part of the Mayor's Compact, which is part of the Minneapolis, St. Paul. They are the ones who initiated that, which was the mayor of Wilmer when he was president of the League of Minnesota Cities, and they got that right out of the United Nations. And it's called the Inclusive Cities Resolution, and the Habitat 3 out of the United Nations. They are following the United Nations to the T on their Inclusive Cities, which was Ban Ki-moon who started all this, and they're following it word for word, city for city, using the League of Cities, using the Chamber of Commerce and multiple other different resources, and they're using the media not to tell you the truth.
How long before this thing just completely erupts.
It already has.
But I'm saying to the point where even the most, I don't know, conflict adverse Minnesotan finally wakes up and says, enough already.
But I think it has. I think when Trump came in, you gave people back the voice, and people are now rising up, and this is what's giving Islam that fear of going, wait a second, how'd they get their voice back? We had them under control. The OIC did the hate speech. We had this on our way to, and now it's going, wait, what happened? It went too fast. It has happened.
And what happened to the churches?
Well,
apparently, I must be a very powerful guy for a place like St. John's, the Evangelist Episcopal Church.
It has nothing to do with them.
No, I'm just saying, just an example to shut us, not even allow us to walk in the door.
Right.
That's fear on their part.
Bobophobia, again. But the liberal churches are more in tune about this stuff than the conservative churches. The churches that I've been participating in, they don't even think about this.
Same here.
They don't think about it. I mean, they're just, the naivety is overwhelming. It's just unbelievable.
Well, just on a side note, there is a verse in the Quran called 326. It's and the verse is basically let there come to a common consensus between us and them, and the Muslims, 136 Muslims, prominent Muslims, wrote an agreement back in 2008. They wrote an agreement, and they had 500 evangelicals sign on to this, the biggest churches in the country. But they never read it. They never read where this actually comes from. It comes from, I believe it's verse 326, and they signed on to this, but they never read the rest of the verse. The rest of the verse says, as long as they come to the will of Allah. And Allah is the only God. But they only took the first line out of there, and 500 evangelicals signed on to this. So they said, well, they want to come to a common word. Oh, man, we want to come to a common word too. Really? Comes right out of that verse. Read the next line. As long as they believe that Allah is one God.
Well, and I'm going to have to agree with Ron here, not disagreeing with you, but...
We're not in disagreement here.
Well, no, but I'm just saying in the Trump era, people are responding. Keith Ellison is right now losing in the polls. I think people in Minnesota are figuring out that this is a problem, that Keith Ellison.
But meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have a Minnesota mainstream media that has been drinking the Kool-Aid for so long. There's a portrait of Ilhan Omar inside the building of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. A portrait.
What? Why would that be? Why would they have a portrait of
Separate, separate but equal.
Why would there be?
Why would they build a wall?
Why would there be
I
a
want
room?
A portrait in there.
Me too. Why would there be a room at the state capitol?
Why do they want to build a wall around a certain part of Minneapolis? They were talking about
Cedar Riverside. That's right.
All this is really what this is. This is a direct violation of because Islam doesn't believe that man-made laws are legal. They believe that they're illegal, and the Constitution is illegal doctrine to them. So they can go along. There's two different verses in the Quran, and 428 is one of them. It says, Allah has lifted the weight off your shoulders. And he said, because Allah has made you weak. If you're in the land of Darul Harb, and it says the land of the enemy. And I even asked Muslims this, do we live in Darul Harb? And they say, yeah, it means land of the enemy. So God has made you weak, but you could eat pork here, you could pray here, you don't have to pray here, you can do as we do. They can live just like we do. The Quran says that in 428. Until what? Until the verse 435. Until our numbers are risen to we have enough power to take over. First they start with the electoral races and stuff. Once our power has risen, then we must subjugate. There are 5 different levels of subjugation. I don't want to get into that. But once we subjugate, if they don't go to the 5th level, then the 5th level is the hand or the sword. Then that is their final version. This is obligatory in 4 or 5 levels of fiqh, which is the Islamic schools of jurisprudence. This is obligatory, no matter where they are. Islamic law and the Constitution of Somalia says, I think in Article 8, Section 3, it says that even if you leave the country of Somalia, wherever you go, Somalian Constitution always reigns over the Constitution where you reside. So if they believe in Islamic law, that says that we must subjugate, and if they believe in the land that they come from, that their laws are better than ours, well, then they are in defiance of Article 1 or the First Amendment of the Constitution.
And we're just in the way.
And we are in the way.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask it.
Okay, ask a question.
Okay, here you go. Tell it to me like
Bobophobia. That's a question.
Tell it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. For the last 4.5 months, I've been drafted back into service. I'm now behind a microphone and a camera. 4.5 months, that's it. And apparently I've become a very dangerous guy.
Yeah.
How?
And I know you for 20 years. You're not a dangerous
25
guy.
years. I'm not a dangerous
25,
guy.
see?
But apparently, explain to me how, from your point of view, that just simply talking about these things above the table, and I have challenged Jaylani Hussein 4 times now, well, 3 times really, to an on-air conversation. He tentatively agreed, we'll do it, we'll do it.
I was there when he did it.
That's right. And I did the same thing at the Minnesota History Center a few weeks back. He just lost it, completely lost it with me.
So here's
what is so dangerous about what we're doing, from your point of view?
Okay, under the 5 levels I was telling you about that they have to, which is the mouth, the tongue, the hand, the sword, the heart. They have to do 4 of those before they ever get to violence. Okay, so they're going through all 4 stages before they ever get to any type of fatwa on you. All right, so there is a group, another organization. There were 29 different unindicted co-conspirators, as you mentioned that, in the Holy Land trial. One of the unindicted co-conspirators, number 22 on the list, was CAIR. They actually had a different name at that time. They wanted their name changed off that. The judge wouldn't remove it. But there's another one on there just below that. It's called the IIIT, which is Islamic Institute of Islamic Thought.
I've seen that.
And they are out of, I believe, Herndon, Virginia. And they're the ones who are actually creating, they're a 501c3, they're the ones who are pushing the Islamophobia. They actually said that they're going to use it as a weapon to weaponize First Right Amendment. Islamophobia was created like in the late 80s and then brought into England, and they used it. It means irrational fear of what? But it was brought to the United States. It is being propagated by an Islamic institute, and they are using this as a weapon against you, against your First Right Amendment. This all goes down to the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. And then the last
freedom of the press.
And freedom of the press. But the last one is very important, because the last one is freedom to petition your own government. Right. If you go to your government and you ask your senator, you ask your state representatives, you ask your mayor or whatever, they've taken away all 5 of your First Right Amendment.
Look at Mayor Kleiss in St. Cloud.
Mayor Kleiss is
perfect.
But then again, Mayor Kleiss belongs to the COP 21, which is the Agenda 21, which is the Mississippi mayors. He's been to Paris. He's worked with the United Nations. He is a globalist through and through. I mean, you could look up COP 21. It is the United Nations agenda out of Rio de Janeiro, 1992.
I have a loaded question. And I've asked this question of Mayor Kleiss and several other people, and I presented this in writing to Tom Emmer. He never responded.
Never will.
The question is, where are you going to go when you destroy your own house? You know, he who troubleth his own house shall inherit the wind. Once they destroy the platform or allow it to be destroyed, this great state that I have come to love, where are you going to go? You can't outrun this problem. You cannot. I don't care who you are.
They don't see it that way. They don't see as them as the problem. They see you as the problem, because that's what they're working with. You're the one standing in the way of freedoms. Even though they're taking your freedoms away from you, they believe that you're the ones that are taking freedoms away from them. They're looking at you as the obstacle. Once they can get you out of the way, Muslims can live as they want, be as they want, and act as they want.
So, yeah, I see, at least in the Republican Party, there's a lot of apologists for the Muslim community.
Especially
they're peaceful people.
Just ask them. We'll ignore Valley Fair.
Yeah,
not all Muslims.
No, they don't. But the thing is, that's their answer. Not all Muslims are this way, and that is true. Not all Muslims are committing crimes.
But I didn't see a whole bunch of crazed Presbyterians or Lutherans 100 of them,
but
hopping the fences and rioting
But that's
at Valley
just some
Fair.
of them. That's what their answer is
That's not
going
my
to
point.
be.
I don't even see 5.
But you saw it tonight. You saw it today because the interfaith dialogues, what they're working with. See, and now, if you know about the interfaith dialogues, I've been to many interfaith dialogue meetings.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I'm
you
glad,
have my condolences.
No, I mean, I go there because I want to learn.
Yeah.
I talk to them and I want to learn. It's the problem.
When you can have a dialogue.
Exactly. Well, if we can't. There's no such dialogue. They bring in speakers from IRG, and then you don't get there's no dialogue. They tell you the same thing Jelani
All due
does.
respect, are you masochistic then?
No, the point is I need to learn them as much as they need to learn me. I know them well. I know there's tequila. I know that this is subjugating. They're just slowly. It's just a slow bleed, but. We have a problem. It's going to be here. We have to figure out a way. The two cannot live side by side under the same umbrella. The two cannot. Islam and the Constitution. I mean, you've had the presidents of William Gladstone out of England. You've had in the 1800s. You've had John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Winston Churchill said that that these two cannot live.
Martin Luther.
But they all said, I mean, you'd look back in 1605, they lined up boats to get them out of France, I mean, because they needed to get them out of the country. Now, are we going to do that? No, because the Constitution doesn't allow us to do that. They're allowed to be here. So we've got to figure out a way. It's almost going to be separate but equal. Are they going to have to build a wall around Minneapolis? I don't know. That's pretty silly, but what are we going to do?
Yeah, but then you got to build a wall around Rochester, Mankato, Wilmer, St. Cloud.
I know.
But here's the big question to me, which I think people out there want answered or need to understand, is the uninformed person about the Muslim faith and what they hear on the news in various places is we're a religion of peace. We're peaceful people. And Muhammad had a lot of writings about peacefulness and being good. Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, what you're looking at is there's two Qurans inside of one. There is the Medina side and the Mecca side. If you open it up, the Medina side starts off with, that's the last 10 years of his life. But the first part is was the Meccan side, which is the peaceful side. When he did believe, he actually prayed towards Jerusalem for up until 2022. I mean, it says that in verse 2, 145. It says that he prayed. He changed the direction of prayer to Medina in 2:145 after he came back, after the Hajj. So when you're looking at the peaceful side, I can tell you that there's peaceful Muslims if they only believe in the Meccan side of the Quran. Right. But if I go to the Medina side, he became a warlord. He had planned 39 battles. He was in 26 of those battles. He killed. I mean, if this is a prophet, in one day he killed 800 Jews in the Battle of Trenches. He lined them up. He made them dig their own trenches. He put his little 12-year-old wife right next to him, and she had to watch 1,200 or 800 Jews get their heads cut off and put in the trenches. So
because they wouldn't convert?
Because they wouldn't convert. This is the Qurayshi tribe, you know, where he grew up when he came back. And he only, you know, so yes.
But that peaceful side does not exist anymore. That's been written out.
No.
Well, not written out of the Quran, but it's been
abrogated.
Abrogated,
yeah,
right.
And when you say it's 6106.
Well, Muhammad said it doesn't count anymore. The newest things I write.
Abrogated. Yeah, there's like
are more.
So this is they
roll over.
This is truly the living, breathing document.
Yeah. So like line 29 abrogated many of the verses, or 9:5, the verse of the sword. They abrogated many verses prior to that. So Allah says he has the right to say something, but he also has the right to change his mind at any time. He could abrogate something and changes that will. So, like you say, they say it's not a changing document. Of course it's a changing document, because Allah changed his mind from Mecca to Medina. So they can't say it's not a changing document. Allah changed it.
Sounds a wee bit schizophrenic to me. Yeah. I'm curious as to where we are now. What can we do at this point? I mean, I know what I'm trying to do with my co-producer and some other people. Right. I know what you're trying to do, and I know what you're definitely trying to do, Ron.
We got 2 minutes, so we got to hurry up on this. Right. What we need to do.
Well,
look at the third rail stuff.
Yeah,
watch this show.
Exactly. No, but we need to get your soul elevated. We need to take this show at more of an elevation to reach more people. These city officials they're I don't know if they're blind or what, but they don't want to see what's really in front of them.
I think they're afraid.
Well, afraid.
Have you watched the DHS hearings? Last Wednesday's hearing in front of Jim Abler's committee, and the one before that.
Jim's not going to expose this stuff.
I don't know.
But that's subjugation. That's part of the 5 levels of subjugation. Part of it is, the subjugation is to intimidate. That's what they do. They go and intimidate. You got to just stand up and say, hey, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm going to stick with the rule of law. I'm going to stick with the Constitution. If you stick with the Constitution, you will not lose. Just stay focused on the Constitution. All this other stuff about Islam, that's irrelevant, because if you stay with your representatives who don't listen to you, but you got to get to them. Emmer's not going to listen to you.
I don't have a congressman.
Oh, okay, he's a man, but he's on an island by himself.
No.
Well, we got about 1 minute to finish this.
Okay,
what do you need to do?
Solutions. What can we do?
Again, we need to sit down with these politicians, and we have to do it in the group form, because they will not do it individually. They will not. If you advertise that we want you to come, they won't show up.
Right.
You got to do it in a private setting. We don't want anybody to know. We want you to sneak down from Delano, where you're from, get down here to say. We'll even come with 50 people. We'll come to Delano, and we're just going to peacefully talk to you. But we have to do it in a private setting, because they are subjugated. They are afraid. They're afraid that they're going to lose their positions. And all this is about the Emmer and all these, they're all waiting till 2020. Because they're wondering, am I going to have a job? Which one of us, congressmen, if we lose the electoral vote, which one of us are going to get bumped?
Well, wow. Tom Emmer fought along with George Soros to rid our country of the electoral college. But anyway,
the main thing is vote. Get the people in that understand. Jeff Johnson understands this.
Stay tuned here with Speechless.
Right.
And thirdrailtalk.com. We're doing great work, taking lots of risks.
You got videos out there.
Yeah, but just going to because videos I don't think do justice. You got to get there and you got to talk about it.
I agree.
All right. Yeah. Well, we're out of time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Folks, remember, if you don't stand up for other people's liberties, who's going to stand up for yours? And good men don't do nothing. God bless. Have a great week. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.